customers yet, so.
Okay. And we have our I was looking for our folks from DOB, and
Oh, there. Jamila Clyburn. But still only 50.
Hi,
there.
good evening, everyone. This is Jamila Belgrave Clyburn from DOB. I'm waiting for my colleague Ophelia. Seems to have a little bit of technical difficulties in joining, but she will be on shortly.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you.
And welcome.
Yes, welcome.
Glad to be here.
Their scale. Want to wait till 6:35?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think we're still only at 20. So
All right.
We have 1 minute at that rate.
now you see
Well,
what
hockey season is about to start, Elizabeth. So that is the phrase for those denizens of the garden. 1 minute.
You're there.
We're there. Okay.
Mhm.
Well,
Okay.
all right, we'll get started. We'll start. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ed Hartzog. I am the one of the co-chairs of the Zoning Development and Housing Committee of Community Board 8. We'd like to welcome you, along with my other co-chairs, Elizabeth Ashby and Anthony Cohen. This is our regular meeting, and this month we will be discussing hot topic for those of you in the community board. This is after hours variances. We have some data that was passed around earlier by John Carouse, our very able assistant from the board, sent down some numbers. But before I go on, I will let John give us the rules of the road for those who are their first time here. And after that, turn it over to Anthony to introduce this month's guest. John, please take it away.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. If it's your first time joining us virtually. You notice they're all currently muted and everyone remain muted throughout the meeting except for the co-chairs and the presenters as we move through the agenda. Following the presentation, as we move through the agenda, the co-chairs will call on members of the public wishing to speak. You can participate by pressing the raise hand button on the bottom below your screen and not the wave thumbs up button as those disappear. Only press the raise hand button once. If you press it a second time, it will go back down. If you're calling on your phone, press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute yourself. Be on the lookout for a prompt asking to confirm unmuting once the co-chairs call on you. The chat is available for technical support only, not to ask questions to co-chairs as they will not see the chat. If you're using an older version of Zoom, you may need to find the React menu, parsnip menu, or button that says more, where you will find the raise hand feature there. If you plan to speak during the meeting, it would help us that you rename yourself on your device so we may know who is calling to speak. Please do not raise your actual hand, wave at the screen, as we may not be able to see you, and chat me in technical support.
Thank you, John. And I will pass it right over to Anthony to take over.
Great. Hi, good evening. And our guests are from the Department of Buildings. And as Ed mentioned, our topic tonight is after-hour variances, which for all of us who have had the misfortune to live near construction in the district, we all know what those are like. But Jamila, are you guys ready? Yes. No, I see Julia from City Planning.
Yes, I am ready.
Okay, great.
So, good evening, everyone. My name is Jamila Belgrave Clyburn. I am the Deputy Director of Intergovernmental Affairs at the Department of Buildings for the Borough of Manhattan. So, I may have corresponded with quite a few of you or folks in your team in the past, but happy to be here this evening. And joining me is our Director of Intergovernmental Affairs, Ophelia Fitz, as I imagine many of you are familiar with her as well. So, thank you for having us. So I sent over a few minutes ago our presentation. I'm not sure if you were able to pull that up. I'm not able to share my screen, unfortunately.
Got that,
John.
Great.
All right. So it is a bit dense. We're going to dive a bit into the code and what is allowed. I figure for the flow of things and in the interest of time, because I know there may be some questions, I can just give a brief overview. And as we get to the denseness of the code, John, if you could share that presentation or maybe have it on your screen so folks can take a look, and we'll dive right in.
I put it up right now. That helps.
Wonderful.
Thanks,
Okay, there we go. So just reading briefly on the first slide. So after hours rules, section 24-222. After hours and weekend limits on construction work. And so except as otherwise provided in this subchapter, it shall be unlawful to engage in or to cause or permit any person to engage in construction work other than on weekends between the hours of 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. A person may, however, perform construction work in connection with the alteration or repair of an existing one or two family owner-occupied dwelling classified in occupancy group J-3, or a convent or rectory on Saturdays and Sundays between the hours of 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. This is provided that such dwelling is located more than 300 feet from a house of worship. And so now we'll get into a bit of the code. So after hours work authorization. So this is thank you, next slide. Notwithstanding section 24-222 of this subchapter, an agency authorized to issue permits for construction work may, along with such permit, issue an after-hours work authorization for the work site. Such after-hours authorization may permit construction work to be performed at the site before 7 a.m. or after 6 p.m. on weekends and or Saturday and or Sundays, and this is subject to the conditions and restrictions set forth in the section. And that's part A. Next slide. Moving to Part B. The agency issuing such authorization must obtain a certification from its permittee that the permittee has developed a noise mitigation plan for the site in accordance with this subchapter and that such plan is in compliance with noise mitigation rules. In the case of emergency work, such certification shall be submitted within 3 days after the commencement of work. And I wanted to be clear, the noise mitigation plan that comes by way of DEP authorization. Next slide, please. We're on section C. Thank you. If after hours work at the site is not being performed in compliance with such plan or where no plan is in effect, the department or the agency issuing such authorization at the request of the commissioner or on its own account may take appropriate action, including but not limited to the refusal to renew such after hours authorization. And we are moving to section D. I'm sorry, where there is full compliance with the noise mitigation plan, yet nevertheless aggregate sound levels from the site where an after hours authorization is in effect. This exceeds 8 decibels above the ambient sound level as measured in any residential receiving property dwelling unit with windows and doors that may affect the measurement 14 closed. The commissioner may request the person performing the work to confer with representatives of the department regarding additional noise mitigation measures that may be employed at the site to reduce aggregate sound levels. We're just moving on to the next section. This is continued. After such conference, the commissioner may direct amendment of the noise mitigation plan for the site. Failure to respond to a request for a conference or to amend the noise mitigation plan within the time prescribed in a notice issued by the department shall be a violation of the code. Next section, E. Authorization for after-hours construction work may only be issued in the following circumstances. There's a few parts to this. So for the first part, emergency work. Agencies shall authorize such after-hours construction work for emergency conditions inside or outside the property line involving a threat to public safety or causing or likely to cause the imminent interruption of service required by law, contract, or franchise. An emergency authorization issued pursuant to this paragraph shall expire as determined by the agency, but no later than the 90th day after its issuance, and shall be renewable in accordance with agency procedures while the emergency continues. The second part to that, public safety. Agencies may authorize such after-hours work inside or outside of the property line where the agency determines that the work cannot reasonably or practically be performed on weekdays between the hours of 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. because of traffic congestion and or concern for worker and or public safety. An authorization issued pursuant to this paragraph shall expire as determined by the agency, but no later than the 90th day after its issuance, and shall be renewable in accordance with agency procedures. Moving to the next section. Thank you. City construction projects. Agencies may authorize after-hours work by or on behalf of city agencies for projects that are judicially mandated or the subject of consent orders and or where a project is necessary in the public interest, including but not limited to facilities, equipment, and infrastructure for the provision of water, sewage, sanitation, transportation, and other services necessary for the health or safety of the public. An authorization issued pursuant to this paragraph for city construction project shall remain in effect for the duration of the project. Next slide, please. Construction activities with minimal noise impact. The commissioner shall promulgate rules setting forth a list of construction activities with minimal noise impact and specific noise mitigation measures applicable to such activities. Agencies may authorize the performance of such construction activities in accordance with such rules. So once again, going back to the component of DEP has to authorize the noise mitigation plan before an after-hours variance can be approved by the Department of Buildings. Section 5, undue hardship. Agencies may authorize after-hours work if the commissioner certifies that the permit holder has substantiated a claim of undue hardship resulting from unique site characteristics, unforeseen conditions, scheduling commitments, and/or financial considerations outside the control of the permit holder, and that the applicant has received approval from the department of an alternative noise mitigation plan pursuant to Section 24-221 of this subchapter, specifying the activities and devices that will be used for such after-hours construction, and setting forth the additional mitigation measures above and beyond those measures otherwise required for such devices and activities pursuant to the department's rules, that the applicant will use to significantly limit noise emissions from the site of such after-hours work. Next slide continued. Application for such certification shall be submitted to the department in a form and manner to be set forth in the rules of the department. The applicant for an after-hours authorization under this paragraph shall submit such certification to the issuing agency. Next slide, thank you. Construction work without noise mitigation plan is unlawful. It shall be unlawful to perform work at any construction site in the city that is not in compliance 15 with a noise mitigation plan where such plan is required pursuant to the subchapter and with the noise mitigation rules adopted pursuant to this subchapter. Notwithstanding any other provision of this code, construction work performed in accordance with a noise mitigation plan that is in full compliance with this subchapter and such rules shall be deemed to be in compliance with all decibel level limits set forth in other subchapters of this code. The provisions of this subchapter shall supersede all other provisions of this code relating to construction activities or devices that are inconsistent with or in conflict therewith. And then the final slide is a link that John, I had shared with you previously. For anyone who is interested in viewing the after-hours variances citywide, we do have an interactive map where you are able to click the link. You can then search an address and you're able to see the current after-hours map. And when you click the link, it does show how recent. I think the last time I searched, it might have been like as of today. There we go. Yep, as of today. And so that concludes this part of the presentation. Ophelia, if you are also here, we are open to any questions you may have. Thank you.
You.
Okay, Ed, I guess the question is whether, well, all right. We do have some people who have questions at this stage. So why don't we go first to members of the public? And it looks like we have Yasmina. You could unmute her. Oh, you are unmuted.
Hi. So in the presentation, I'm not sure if I'm looking at something that's older than what was presented. I'm looking at something from 2018. Is that out of date or was this like a short version of what might be listed under 24-223? Is what you presented more current than 2018 is my question?
Yes.
It is. Okay, so in what I'm looking at has mention of 75 decibels within 200 feet of a residential area, measured 50 feet from the construction site. Is that no longer a way to measure the impact on the surrounding community?
My colleague Ophelia is trying to unmute herself. If you can.
Oh, she can't unmute herself, but John certainly can unmute her.
Yeah, can they raise your hand? Because I'm trying to find them on here.
Ophelia, are you Samsung SM-A, etc.?
That's probably her. I believe she had to call in. Yes, that's her.
Okay. Good, great. You are unmuted.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for unmuting. Jamila, we were getting a question from Yasmin. I think it's Yasmin.
Mm-hmm.
Could you kindly repeat the question, please?
Yeah, so what in my own research and trying to understand what's permitted and what's not, for Administrative Code 24-223, under D, there are 4 items, but what was presented just now, I believe, was only item 1 with the 8 decibel reading within an apartment. But there's an item 3 that discusses 75 decibels as the threshold for after-hours variances, measured 50 feet from the construction site if the construction site is within 200 feet of a residential area. And I'm wondering, is that no longer current, or was that just not presented this evening?
It wasn't presented, and for the apartment, it's different than for a active construction site. So you're correct. The 75 within 50 feet is correct. And as it pertains to the decimal level, that's DEP, that's under the jurisdiction of DEP. So anything with the noise level needs to be directed to DEP.
Okay, that's helpful, but I just want to point out that that's, at least for community members, those 4 points under Section D are really crucial, I think, to people's understanding of what's allowed and what's not allowed under after-hours variances. So if there could be some clarification on that, because many people are being subjected to far louder than those noise levels under these permits. Thank you.
Thank you, understood. In cases as such where the community determines or believe that the decimal level exceeds the 75, 311 complaint should be filed, and that would be directed to DEP. DOB has no jurisdiction on noise level or decimal levels.
Okay. I'm gonna, just before we get to committee members who have comments right now, in general, how do you handle 311 complaints? Because I know from personal experience that I measured the decibel level within my apartment, the ambient and the, let's say, the contribution from the construction about 100 feet away from my window, and it was more than 8 decibels difference. And the sound levels coming from the construction site were regularly between 70 and 85 decibels. And that noise was largely a result of the operation of the materials hoist, which began operation at 6:30 in the morning. Now, I don't know whether running the elevator counts as work or not, but from 6:30 in the morning, and then with after-hours permits till at least 7, frequently as late as 8, there was sound of construction. I made a 311 complaint, which I then forwarded to our district office, as we have been encouraged to do, for follow-up. And the work continued at that level, all of those hours, until the project was completed. So how do you police, I guess that's the right word, how do you police violations?
So basically, what I'll explain to you, 311 complaints, as it pertains to, after our variances. We try to educate the community boards, managers, staffer, and the community to highlight the difference when filing 311 complaints. When you file a 311 complaint for noise, it is automatically assigned to DEP. DP is in charge of the noise code, if you want to use the word in charge, or oversees the noise code. The noise code is DP. Once you file a complaint, noise, DP. If you file, or when you file a 311 complaint and you say construction noise, that is the key word, then it comes to DOB.
We do call it, I did call it construction noise.
Okay, understood. Sometimes we do receive the complaints, and sometimes I'm not sure if the 311 operator, whoever the person is, or how you entered it, knows that construction goes to DOB. But in the event that we receive that complaint regarding construction noise, we come out, send an inspector out to evaluate the site to see if the work that is being done is within the approved after hour variance. So one of the questions I know a lot of people will say when they look into the system, which is the BIS system, the BIS system, is that they filed a 311 complaint and it says compliance noted, no violation issued. If once the inspector gets to the site and it's within the hours that we approve the variance, which is say 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., then they're permitted to do the work. However, if the noise is the concern, then that's where it needs to go to DP so that DP can send someone out with the equipment, because this agency does not have the equipment to test for decimal levels, as this is a DEP function.
Oh, okay. I understand exactly what you're saying, and I will uncharacteristically not behave like a dog with a bone here, and keep going. But I think that there's a real problem in the coordination between your agency and DEP. And it's very easy for government agencies or any organization, for one group within an organization to say, oh no, that's not us, it's them. And then for the other group to say, oh no, that's not us, it was actually the first guys. So I think that there's something missing in the coordination. And then the only other thing I wanted to mention before we get to all of the other people lined up is that at this stage is that it appears to us, based on our anecdotal experience living within the district and with lots of construction of tall residential buildings in the district, that after hours variances are issued are granted as a matter of course, and that I don't necessarily understand, and I don't think I'm particularly dense, I don't necessarily understand why that is so, because I can understand the safety ones. I can understand wanting to avoid unnecessary, or let's say unnecessary, avoid congestion when concrete trucks are coming through, all of that. I understand all that. But frequently, and I have looked at them off and on over the years, frequently hardship is claimed when the hardship consists of, we want to finish the project faster. And we built this into the project schedule. And that would seem to us, in general, maybe not all of us, that would seem to us to be not really a hardship. And that the sacrifice that the neighborhood makes for these projects is not necessarily it's not justified by that kind of indiscriminate granting of after-hours variances. But that was a statement, and so I'm going to go now to
Before,
Alita Camp. Oh, go
hi.
ahead, Ophelia. I'm
Yes,
sorry.
I'm sorry. Hi, Anthony. Just to clarify something here for you. For the Department of Buildings, and not to, blaming one agency or another agency, the rule that is set forth is clear. So I'll explain to you that the department has the power to issue after-hour variances for emergency work,
Mm-hmm.
public safety,
Mm-hmm.
city construction projects,
Mm-hmm.
construction with minimal noise impact. That's it. If you see a variance that's issued for hardship or the claim of hardship or undue hardship is the term that's used, that variance had to be approved, or the work scope, I would say, would
Mm-hmm.
need to be approved by DEP. Once DEP approves the undue hardship, the applicant takes that paperwork, submit it to DOB or upload it into our system, which is DOB now, and select undue hardship. At that particular time, DOB issues the variance to the applicant because DEP has vetted or looked at the request and determined that it's undue hardship. Just want to clear that up.
Okay, thank you. Actually, at the end of the day, that was probably very useful. Thank you. Now I think we can go to Alita.
Thank you. And thank you for your presentation. I'm confused about a lot of things. One is I'm not really understanding why the Department of Environmental Protection is vetting for undue hardship when undue hardship is a financial thing. When several years ago at the Housing Committee, a developer putting up 2 buildings took pulling teeth for 3 hours to get them to admit that they were seeking an after-hours variance because they wanted to get their profits faster. As Anthony pointed out, that's not undue hardship, but even if they came with a financial consideration, which is widely used in this city, I don't understand why the Environmental Protection Agency is going over that and not an agency more attuned to the financial. Then I have a question. It looks like there were 190 after-hours variances going on in this district this year. How many overall construction projects are going on? Because that seems to be a fairly high proportion of all of the construction projects. And last, several years ago, DOP came and made a similar presentation. And what they said was about the granting of after-hours variances. And what they said was that developers or contractors are granted after-hours variances as a matter of course all the time. And not until a member of the public objects to the after-hours variances does DOB actually go over and look at the paperwork. So I'd like to know if that's what's still going on. And if that's what's going on, I don't understand how that is a matter of policy, that after-hours variances are granted routinely only to be viewed when the public objects. And that was a statement by DOB, which was really surprising to me, but they were considerate enough to come and explain. So those are my points or my questions, which basically is this whole process, given the density of this neighborhood and the density of construction projects, seems designed to benefit the developers over the people who live here, who may be elderly, who may be sick, who may have young children, who may work out of their apartments. And most people do at least 2 work days a week. So I know I'm taking up a lot of time, so I'll just stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Alita.
Hi, Alita, Ophelia. All right, so as it pertains to the financial portion, which you mentioned, that's a hardship. If that's what the applicant presents to DEP, that's DEP for sure. You ask for construction project in the number of construction project in CB8 that warrants the issuance of 190 variants. We don't have that data at the moment, but we can definitely get you the number of active construction permits or jobs in CB8, so we can get that to you. The department oversees all the buildings in New York City. With that said, variants are issued in every borough. I wouldn't say it's a matter of fact, like you stated earlier, that variances are issued. And we do rely, I will agree with you, the agency relies on the community oftentimes to let us know when there's a site that's problematic, as far as after hour variance or any type of complaints. We accept those complaints and we take action as quick as soon as possible. So it's now everything is now done in DOB now. We don't accept paper anymore, Alita. So everything is done in DOB now.
Okay, I just have one little tiny follow-up thing, and I apologize to everyone for undue attention to this, but and I know you don't have this information, and I certainly do not. But could you get it for us? And the information is, in addition to how many projects there are, how many after hours permits or complaints about after hour variances, how many of those complaints have resulted in violations in the last year or two? Because I think that many of us who have in fact submitted complaints feel as though our complaints go from the 311 operator directly into the garbage. And I'm not saying you guys have anything to do with that. I'm just saying that there is a feeling that there is no enforcement. And it's not just after hours variances, it's all sorts of things in the city. Anyway, so if we could get an idea of how many there are that actually result in violations, that would be extremely useful.
All right. So before we go on, Anthony, just let me respond to what you're saying about the 311 complaints going in the garbage. I will let you know a lot of these developers, they have a system, or they sign up or for some system or some company that each time or every time a 311 complaint is filed, they get notified. Just to put that out there.
Okay.
Just be mindful of that. So oftentimes when our inspectors get to the location, they were notified that a complaint was filed by 311, and two, we get there, then there's no work taking place. Granted, we have gone to locations where complaints were filed and we didn't get there right away because there's other prior to
Sure.
emergency throughout the city, and our night folks couldn't make it there to observe the after hours work being done.
Okay, thank you.
Can
All right,
Can I jump in
Elizabeth.
real quick, Anthony? I'm sorry.
Sure.
Just for numbers, since we're kind of on that theme of numbers, John, the number you sent us with the 3,300, is that, or a little over 3,000? That was this year, the after hours variances in our community. Valerie's
Yes, that's
nodding.
correct.
Yes, so it is.
Yes.
So, yeah, thank you. Just a quick aside, and I don't know what, just as a statement or for people for their comments to shape it. So the numbers that were sent around by John earlier this afternoon to the committee members indicate that a little over 3,000 after hours variance permits were issued for our community district. And I did some quick scrolling through, and of that, I found that 6 locations make up 43% of all permits. 6. That's it. One in particular. Now it goes to this is the medical. Look from Google Maps. It's 510 East 62nd, right by the water. It's right across when you get off the FDR. They have 458, but it's CUNY at 695 Park, and the other one that indicates 912 Lex. They both have like about, combined, have about 12% of all the permits. I just thought I'd put that out there. I don't know if there's some there's a comment there or not, but I just put the numbers for people to whatever. Food for-
Okay. So Ophelia again. So Ed, you mentioned that at 510 East, what's the address again?
It's 510 East 62. They have 458 so far this year.
Okay, and you stated that it's a CUNY, correct?
No, that one's not CUNY. The two CUNY locations, by the way, I think it's it's like all things in New York, the address is kind of a little quirky, but it's the same block. If you pardon me, one address reads 695 Park Avenue, and the other one reads 912 Lexington Avenue. And anyway, I think it's that same block, and the numbers are just different on Lex and Park. That's all.
Okay, so do you know what is it, a hospital or a CUNY or a
Well, I know
school?
the ones on Park and Lex, that's CUNY. I know that for sure.
Okay.
That's CUNY. That's right by the subway, by the way. That's
Okay.
subway.
Probably
All
Hunter.
right.
It's
So
yeah, between 67 and 68.
okay, so again, I'll refer you back to the section of the code that says city construction projects.
Right.
There are no limits on city construction projects. If it's a CUNY, school, any type of school, DOE, SCA, there are no limits on the issuance of variance. However, I'll repeat, however, if there are complaints or there's noise that's produced, well, not noise, but if the construction is excessive in the sense of the timing, you can notify the agency, DOB that is, and we will have a conversation with SCA or CUNY about how it's impacting the community.
Ophelia, just because I'm kind of new to this part of the code, and forgive me for those of you who are much more well versed in it, building type. I'm sorry, Anthony. The one thing
Go ahead.
I mentioned through the presentation was the very beginning when you were going through the code. You were at 24-222. You were talking about when you could do construction work, 7 to 6 during the weekday, 10 to 4 on the weekend, and then you went to 2223A. And one thing I noticed about that is there's no time designation in that section, which I caught my eye. And I think there's something about the weekend in that one. I couldn't remember, but if you put that slide up, it just caught my eye. And I didn't know if that was on purpose or if there's nothing to it, or I'm just, watching too many of those shows on television looking for a conspiracy.
So as it pertains to after our variances, variances are issued from Monday through Friday. Regular permitted hours is from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Anything before 7 a.m. requires an after-hour variance. Anything after 6 p.m. requires an after-hour variance. So that's what that means.
Yeah.
And on Saturday and Sunday, automatically, whatever time you choose to begin, you are required to obtain a variance for the entire day. There's no permit, no regular permit that covers weekends or holidays if it doesn't fall on a Saturday. We don't take holidays into consideration.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, sorry, Elizabeth. Thank you, Ed.
Thank you, Anthony. Ed, as an FYI, 510 East 62nd Street is the Animal Medical Center.
Thank you.
So we know that there are people on this call who have concerns about specific individual locations and the volume of variances at specific locations. I'd like to ask sort of some general questions about what is considered in the different types of categories. You've already spoken about the undue hardship category a little bit, and let's leave that one aside. I'd like to talk about the public safety category for a second. I've been looking, thank you very much for the link to the active after hours variances, and that then links to the DOB's website. And so I've actually started looking at some of these variances while this Zoom has been going on.
And I'm noticing, for example, that there are after-hours variances categorized under public safety for and the underlying reason for the variance in the for the request is demolition of sort of the exterior shell of a building. Now, isn't demolition a very common component of a Department of Buildings permit that involves demolition? And why would the very common demolition of a building be considered a sufficient public safety hazard that it requires an after hour, or that it is an acceptable reason for an after hours variance?
So I'll say to you, Elizabeth, I will need an address. Do you have an address? Because each case is looked at differently as it pertains to a regular permit and an after-hour variance.
Sure. 1233 York Avenue.
And what type of facility is that, or what is housed in that building?
So they are previously residential high rise. It's a residential high rise. It is being demolished. It has current active after hours per variances under the category public safety. And the reason for the request of the variance states continued demolition of the exoskeleton, or I'm paraphrasing here for a minute, but I will pull it up very specifically. So after hours variance, and I've now looked at, this is a site that has had over 40 after hours variances this year. And so far, the current, it says continuation of the current active ones say continuation of demolition of superstructure for the description of work. And many of the others I've checked have said very similar things. But demolition of a superstructure is not an unusual component here. So why is that considered a public safety issue?
So I'll ask you a follow-up question before I answer.
Sure.
What is next to this building?
Another empty residential building.
And that surrounds that area? What's in that area?
And then the next building adjacent to it is a MSK, I think a research
Yeah.
facility.
Over there by
Okay.
66 and 67.
Okay, so I'll say
Which,
to you,
interestingly, the immediately adjacent building, when I have not looked up, there's also has another 40 active after hour variances for that location as well within this year.
okay, so I'll say to you, which I'll look up now on Google Maps. If this building is owned by Memorial Sloan Kettering,
Mhm.
this location has a daily operation of seeing patients with cancer for certain types of procedures.
Nope, this is not a patient center. The adjacent building is not a patient center.
It does not directly have to be the building that's immediately next door.
Okay. There's a
To
building
impact.
across the street.
Once it's in the surrounding area where the noise can impact, then that's when the variance, I understand clear what you're saying, but the variance or the hours that they would perform the demo for the extent, the noise, like exceeding certain amount or the 75 it's done during the week at 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. or on Saturdays when it's not occupied or used for cancer patients.
Well, that makes zero sense because cancer patients are in the facility across the street 24/7. So there is no time in which there are no cancer patients across the street.
Well,
But
and
So beyond that, let's
you are correct, Elizabeth. However, the key to that is the work that is taking place from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. For the demo, the decimal levels are a little bit higher than that of 7 a.m. to 6 p.m.
So
I will say, hypothetically, say the demo produces, say, 70 decimal levels, right? That scope of work or that type of demo would be done from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. And then the lower decimal levels are done from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m.
So let me ask about the way the variances work.
Okay.
Do they specify the time or
Yeah.
date? So for example, I'm looking at a variance that runs, or this request runs from the 27th of September. Okay, so Saturday from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And again, it's also asking the following Saturday from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. This is now one for 420 East 67th Street, which is in the an adjacent building to 1233 York. I guess the question is it reasonable to assume that in construction planning, a project which has so far in this year requested over 40 variances, that they would have known in their planning process that they would need variances for those greater decibel levels that you've just described?
Well, like I said earlier, construction is from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. I am not sure what the project manager or the project team anticipated. We are not at the planning stage, but I can say to you that we've received complaints from this board for 1233 York Avenue. We've received complaints that we've looked in depth with the board and responded to the board. We've also met with Memorial Sloan Kettering numerous times to go over the community concerns. And it is deemed public safety, if that's what you're asking. It is deemed public safety.
And that public safety is because of the noise to cancer patients? Is that what you're saying?
I am not saying the public safety is deemed as a noise to the cancer patient. You're speaking about two separate things. So the hours that the variance is issued for,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That is in consideration of the patients. Yes. The public safety is for when there's less foot traffic, right? And also the surroundings for, I would say, depending on, I would say foot traffic, workers, the type of carting that needs to be done to remove the demo from the site.
Okay, but all of those kinds of things seem to me are very typical conditions for any demolition. That there is foot traffic that is going to be greater during the working day than on a weekend or after work hours. That seems pretty standard. So what am I correct in based on what you're saying, that in order to issue an after hours variance, the DOB and the DEP do not at any time consider how many requests are made by a project, that is not a factor in your determination of whether or not a variance should be given?
Well, I can say to you that we do look at variance requests when they come in. And earlier, Alita mentioned we had a meeting before. We rely on the community to notify us oftentimes when there's complaints as far as noise in the construction, the type of construction noise that's being done, the hours that they've being actually conducting work, right? So we rely on that. In this case, 438 66th Street, which is the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, it's a different situation.
What is the difference in the situation?
The difference in the situation is that across the street, which we mentioned, right? Across the street, there are patients. There are patients occupying that building. And as I said earlier, the scope of work, which you spoke about, and the decimal level during normal permitted hours differs than that of the after hours.
Okay. This is fascinating information.
It
Thank
is.
you very
Thank you, Elizabeth. It is indeed. All right. Valerie.
Yes, fascinating is one way to describe it. Okay, thank you. I appreciate the presentation. I want to go back a little bit, if I may, and try to understand. I want to go back to something you said, Ophelia, about the decibel level complaints being forwarded to DEP as opposed to DOB. So if DEP got 100 complaints about noise violations, are you saying that there's no obligation for them to forward them to you? So that if you were going to issue or were contemplating issuing another after hours permit, you would have no independent record of the fact that all of these complaints were filed.
No, we rely on the community.
But they're not filing them with me.
Or sometimes we do work together with DP with certain issues, right? So perhaps that's something they would send over to us. But someone would have to notify the agency.
But in my capacity, I'm sorry, in my capacity as chair of the board, whenever we speak to an elected about anything, or whenever, we go to a monthly meeting with all the agencies, the first thing we ask people is if they have a 311 complaint. No one is required to file a noise complaint with the community board. So, and we don't get 311s forwarded to us as a matter of course. So I don't even know, unless somebody sends me an email directly or to somebody on the board, what's happening. So basically, you're telling us I'm just a little bit dumbfounded about what you're telling us, quite frankly.
So I'll say to you, complaints are filed and directed to DOB, and if and when those complaints are assigned to DOB, prior to issuing the variance, we look at the complaint section. And if there's a complaint, then we handle internally according to the policies we have in place.
Okay, but what I think I hear you saying is that there's a problem at 311 because, well, there are many problems at 311, but that if somebody calls because they're in their apartment and they can't even hear their television set because of the construction noise that's going on, they're thinking that they're going to go to DOB and they're going to go to DEP, and that they're basically wasting their time because you're never going to know that for 3 weekends in a row, this noise complaint is being filed. But yet, I know that this is not your area, but if that noise complaint is filed for a specific day and you don't go out during that same period of time, you will never, either the DEP nor DOB will ever be able to violate that construction site, because you will never be able to verify that in fact the decibel level is being violated.
Well, DEP would, they do the noise levels, and we'll inspect for the construction. So based on what you're saying, if 311 receives the complaint and DOB, that complaint was not assigned to DOB, then it would be a DEP matter.
Right,
So
but
DOB wouldn't go out in conjunction or would partner with DEP to conduct that inspection unless we're made aware of it by DEP, working agency to agency coordinating, or we're receiving complaints from the community.
how many, and I know this is a little unfair, but how many referrals have you gotten from DEP in the last year of noise complaints about any construction site?
That information I do not have for you, but I know we do receive referrals from all city agencies, including DEP.
Okay, well, I mean, any community board, any person from this community, and I'm going to make an announcement now at every meeting that people who are having noise complaints need to copy us and send them to us. I really do not think that is in the purview of our mission, but since our overall mission is to represent the community, I feel like this is like brand new news and unwelcome at that. But the next thing I want to ask you is, my understanding is that a permit for weekend work can only be filed the Wednesday before the Saturday or Sunday in which the work is to occur.
Yes.
Okay, so now you get that request. Who reviews that request?
It is reviewed internally by the folks who are assigned to review variances.
How
For the
many
unit,
of those
I would
people
say-
are there?
So I will say to you that every borough or each borough has a set of folks or a team of folks or a unit that reviews for variances. So that number of staff, I'm not able to give to you because
Okay.
I don't have that information.
Okay, so now we've seen now in the information that we've received today that, some projects have 452 requests. Now, does that mean that 452 were granted? Because that seems like a crazy amount of after-hour. There are 365 days a year. How many are they doing? Are they doing one in the morning and one at night and one on the weekend? It doesn't even seem like a real number.
So I am not sure the time frame that you're looking at, because there's multiple factors to consider. Are you talking about for the year for the project, or
Yeah,
since
I
the
mean,
inception, since the project started, say the project started in 2020, they've received 432 variances, or are you speaking of year to date, or month to date, or week to date?
well,
So that would need to be clear.
okay, I was under the impression that the numbers that you sent to John today were just
Mhm.
for the year 2025. So,
So the year 2025, that list is for multiple locations, not just one individual. If you have an individual location, I would need, or Jamila, or one of us at DOB would need to go into the property profile and look at the time span that this location received all these variances that you're speaking of. If it's over a year, a couple months, or multiple years.
okay, all right, because I thought when it had the address and it had the number of permits next to it, that was over the year. So maybe, okay, I'm reading that incorrectly, which is fine. How do you, so it doesn't seem like you're actually keeping track, or it doesn't raise any red flags that somebody is coming every single week to ask for a weekend variance.
What do you mean by keeping track? What do you explain that to me?
Well, I mean, we can pick any address you want. It could be 320 East 72nd Street. It can be 340 or whatever. It doesn't matter. But if you're not looking at let's just use the address that Elizabeth used, 1233 York Avenue. You're not keeping track of, if somebody's coming back one week and saying, we need a public safety variance, okay? Or we need, a different, the reasons are different, okay? But every single week, somebody is coming back for an after hours variance. You're not keeping track of that. And that does not raise any red flags for the Department of Buildings.
So I won't use or speak to 1233 York Avenue, but I'll use 280 Broadway, which
Okay.
is the building that we're in. If you said multiple reasons, so the reason has to be one of the five, which we named or stated earlier. So let's go with public safety,
Right.
right?
Right.
If it's public safety and it's being requested, like you said, multiple times, right, within the month or the week, right? You're saying that we're not monitoring, or no one is actually looking at the numbers of requests. Is that what you're asking
No,
me?
what I'm saying is not, you're not going behind the request to say, geez, how is it that every single weekend there's a public safety issue that requires them to work on the weekends?
Understood. We do quality assurance check. It doesn't catch everything. It's not perfect. And again, if the board or the community file complaints about it, or an elected office, we pull that variance and do a deep dive.
Okay, so it would have to be that. Okay, so now I have, and I'm sorry, everybody, I'm trying to cover a number of topics here.
No, it's fine.
So then, okay, let's change it up a little bit. So now it sounds to me, in answer to your question, to Elizabeth's question, that basically, if you're doing a demolition, then without much objection, the Department of Buildings is always going to think that that's a public safety concern during the week, because the theory would be that there are always more people walking around, more traffic, more people on the sidewalk. And so perhaps if you're near a school, there are going to be more kids around. And so during a demolition period, you would be more likely to grant that variance.
Oh, I was muted. All right. So again, 1233 York Avenue, which is the demo, that's not the case for all demo, based on what you're saying. If it's, I will use 280 Broadway. If demo is taking place at 280 Broadway, it doesn't necessarily mean that that work can't be done during the 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. The location that you're referring to is a unique situation in itself. So I'll just speak about demo for other locations in the sense where some work or some of the demo or most of the demo or can be done during their regular permitted hours. It got to be a unique case or a unique situation where they would require to submit a variance for that. So it's not standard
Okay, so
protocol.
if you were a hospital and you were located on Lexington Avenue between 76th and 77th Street, and you were doing a demolition, would you think that because it's a hospital that you would grant those permits fairly regularly during a demolition period?
So you're referring to that particular location, which I
Mhm.
answered earlier. So the answer remains the same, which is the answer I gave to Elizabeth. So I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, it's
if
a
there's
different
a different.
location. It's not York Avenue. It's Lexington Avenue.
It's a hospital. If like I said earlier, if the situation is the same, then it's the same procedure. It would be
Okay.
it would
Okay.
be reviewed the same. Nothing would
Okay.
change in
Okay.
that sense.
So now I'm going to ask
and
you a
I'll
different question.
I'll just say to you, Valerie, it goes back to the section of the code.
Okay. Now, let me switch gears entirely. You have a main artery. You're at, hypothetically, 72nd Street and 2nd Avenue. And you've got one construction project that's going from 72nd to 71st Street. Directly across the street, you have another construction project to the south of that project. And lo and behold, you have yet another one directly to the east of that project. How does the Department of Buildings view requests for after-hours work with 3 different locations basically on top of each other? Is anybody looking to see how that impacts the entire area in terms of congestion, residents who aren't involved in any of these projects, how it impacts their daily life, and also the ability of just pedestrians to walk down any of these streets and or avenues?
So my response to you is most, if not all, of these projects, if you're referring to that street, or as of right projects, right?
Yes.
Each contractor or developer has the ability, right, to submit for an HV. Each location is unique, and each location has the ability to submit for variances. So the answer as to whether the department takes into consideration if there's 5 construction along a thoroughfare producing excessive noise, which is DEP, the answer to your question, if we take that into consideration, is no.
How can that possibly be?
Because the code allows for as of right projects, and everyone has the same rights to submit or request variances.
And
It's
what
just,
about
I would say
the
to you-
rate? And what about the rate of the person who's living in the midst of that 3 different construction projects? What,
I
they
will
have
say-
no rights? They have no rights? You don't have to protect the rights of the people who are living in the buildings that aren't being constructed? Whose department is that?
So everyone has a right, right? You're a resident of New York City. You're a citizen of this country. You have a right. You do have a right. But I'll say to you, for the laws or the laws for the city, right, allows for construction work to be done on any as of right project. The developer or the contractor, whoever it is, has the same ability, or they're granted the same ability as anyone else to submit for an after-hour variance.
Okay, but if you have 3 projects on the same street, and each of them, let's just say for sake of argument, is using a huge crane. How is it that you're not looking at the aggregate construction on that street to determine if those things can even happen at the same time? I understand what you're saying about each project is looked at independently, but in terms of blocking a street, shutting a street down for construction, I think we've all on this call on a Saturday seen a street shut down because there's a huge crane that's putting some block of facade up or something like that. I find it hard to believe that you're not going to look and see if some other person on the block has already got it, and you would deny it just based on that.
So I'll say to you, blocking the street, that's DOT, having cranes at a particular site is a public safety automatically. That is the justification for having a tower crane. And if the tower crane is in use next to a roadway, a sidewalk, or anywhere there are pedestrians going or vehicle or traffic, right? That's something definitely is deemed public safety. So I don't think using a crane or having a crane, depending on the size of crane, would be a good example to speak on.
Well, why not? Because if there's 3 requests for a crane on one day, you're saying that you don't even look at it to see how many cranes are going to be on one block at the same time.
That's not your question, Valerie. Your question.
Yeah, it is.
No,
It is.
no.
Oh, wait.
A crane is a separate thing, and crane is something that can cause life or death for anyone. So a crane is not something for DOB or as an employee who works for the agency and understands the safety of having a tower crane up and having folks go by. We've numerous times, I'm quite sure you've heard over the news, a crane came down or, something happened. So if the agency can protect the life of someone, then a crane is deemed public safety. If you're speaking, which is your original question, that there are multiple construction on a thoroughfare of after our variance work taking place and the agency looking at that, I explained to you, no, we do not do that. Each site is unique in its own way, and they submit their variance and they're entitled to submit for the variance request. If it gets approved is another story. But if you're speaking about a crane, I will not have that conversation with you about a crane.
Wait a minute. Wait. Valerie, I think we have a kind of answer to part of your question. And it seems to me, perhaps I'm mischaracterizing the Department of Buildings attitude. It is that each project is separate and siloed and completely independent from any other project. So that's the answer. That's the way they do things. And we don't, and unless we can persuade the Commissioner of Buildings to change the rules of the Department of Buildings or persuade the city council and the mayor, whoever it may be next time, to change the rules of the Department of Buildings. The Department of Buildings has rules, and I'm sorry to say this, and I don't mean it quite the way I say it, Ophelia, but logic has nothing to do with it. Now I do, and the reason I said it that way is that cranes are dangerous. You mentioned crane accidents. Absolutely true. They absolutely happen. It is terrible. Cranes are extremely dangerous. All of those accidents, as far as I can recall, and it's anecdotal, occurred during regular work hours. So if cranes are so dangerous, why do people have permits to use them at all? That was a rhetorical question. It doesn't need or even want an answer.
Okay, the last thing I'm going to ask, I understand, but you did Ophelia. I completely want to just say thank you for all of the detail and the answers that you're providing tonight, because this is really us trying to really understand what the issues are, because I've received like 20 emails from people who live between 72nd and 71st Street who are trying to understand how this is all going to work with these three projects directly surrounding each other. And I'm now going to just basically tell them that each one is independent and the approval of the work on one has nothing to do with the other, so that theoretically they can expect that if the three different projects file for after hours work permits, whether it's, at night or on the weekends, the Department of Buildings is going to look at each of them independently. And if I'm wrong, you're really not going to care that the people who are living in the buildings next door are going to be bombarded by noise and dust and the inability, quite frankly, to walk down Second Avenue in the particular case that I'm talking about. So that's fine. I just want to know how to answer these questions. The last thing I'm going to ask you is, if there is ever a violation, what are the fines? Because it would seem to me that if the fines aren't steep enough, there's no deterrent to stop these developers from doing whatever they want. So that's my last question. What are the fines? Do they escalate? And how do you do that? And do you ever notify the community board if a fine has actually happened, whether there's a violation, and how does that proceed?
Okay, so I'll say to you, Valerie, the department does care. We care and we understand that people do live, next door to construction site, which is less than 200 feet. We do care. And I'll say to you, which is what we started with, we do accept complaints from the community and also from the community boards and the elected office. Once we receive those complaints, we do a deep dive and we address the complaint. We look into the complaint and we take action on the complaint. Move on to say, as far as notifying if a violation was issued, or are you speaking about an after-hour variance violation or just any violation, to be specific?
Well, since this evening is focused on after hours violations, let's start with that.
Well, okay, I need to make sure, because we do issue numerous types of violations. So I will say to you, no, we do not notify the board of when a violation is issued unless we receive the complaint from the board. We send the board an update, or an elected office an update to say, hey, the Department of Buildings conducted an inspection, a violation was issued for the findings, whatever the inspector observed. If it's work beyond the permitted HV hours or whatever the findings, we will notify the board that way. But generally, no, we do not send out notification for violations.
And what about the amount of how many violations does it take to get a fine, and or to have your project shut down, or to have your new permit for an after hours permit basically revoked because you violated the last 4 permits that you got by either going beyond the hours or doing work that wasn't supposed to be done as part of the permit? I mean, can you just give us some general, what have you seen happen in terms of being violated?
So if we issue a violation for work after hours work that's being conducted after the approved after hour variance hours, we revoke the variance. That's number 1. 2, we issue a violation that needs to be educated in ECB court.
But when you say you revoked the variance, if you told me I could do the work from 7 to 6 last Saturday and I was there till 10 o'clock, so what? You revoked my variance. It was for 1 day only and I already violated it. So no big deal.
Well, I'll say to you, Valerie, it is a big deal. And that is what the department has as a tool in our toolbox to as for an enforcement measure. One, the violation, which goes to ECB court to be adjudicated, and two, to revoking the variance. That is what we have as an agency to take action on a developer or a contractor who violated the after our variance hours.
But what is the practical effect of a revocation for a 1-day permit? I mean, unless it carries through to the next request, I'm just trying to understand. It seems like,
Yes, it would continue. If they submit another request because it's revoked, then yes, it carries through.
okay, thank you. All right, I'm
You're
sorry.
welcome.
Everybody out, thank you so much. I have a question. If you don't have to answer it now, but maybe since we have all these projects and all this scaffolding has gone around what is demolition sites, it is very frequent that while there are lights under the scaffolding so people can walk on the sidewalk, it is very rare that it is turned on. So how does that complaint get, who does that complaint go to? And how does that get corrected? Because that's dangerous.
Okay, so you'd file a complaint with 311. Then if it's coming, that's for the community, of course. And second, if it's coming from the board or an elected office, we would need the 311 number, and we will follow up by inspecting the location. If and when the inspector gets there, if the lights are indeed not working, a violation is issued to the property owner.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ophelia. I do very much appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you, Valerie. Marco.
Thank you, Anthony. I think we have always two antagonist parts, the community and the construction. And we never, ever, the community is going to accept because of the levels of construction. That is required. That is the technology that we have today. So we don't have nothing noiseless. On the contrary, probably even noisier now. Let me put this way. Demolition is different from building. Now, if the residents are complaining of the noise, it's because one of the reasons the demolition team, they cannot demolish big chunks. They almost literally, it has to demolish almost brick by brick for safety reasons. And that changed the schedule of work completely. And when you are saying that the superstructure is not a lousy wall that you are demolish, you are demolish something extremely dangerous that requires extremely attention, and therefore probably it delays the construction process. And that, I think, that leads to the after-hour variance. And the outer, but before to go over there, in construction, I had to differentiate between demolition and building. Demolition, so far, the neighbors has been complaining just only above of the street level. Now we're coming something even very bad, which is the vibration, because now they're gonna put a heavy machines to demolish the foundation of the existing building, and then if the designer decided to go deeper, so the noise, the vibration, it will be unbearable. So today we have this kind of problems. Just wait when they reach that level, that project. It will be a nightmare. Now, in construction to building is different completely, because in building, we can request the teams to try to semi-industrialize the building so they can reduce as much as the time of construction, reduce noise, and reduce many other things that is possible. That the building code allows to do that. So we had to go against of the developers saying that they had to do something in the process of building. Building is completely far away what we discussed. Let me put an example. Just imagine, right now, there is a variance. And this variance oversees twice or three times or four times the limit. Somebody called 311. What do you think? The DOB or DEP has the inspector to come and verify that? No, they had to wait probably 1 day or 2 days. After 1 day or 2 days, they won't have that problem. And the report will say there is no actions because there is no noise. So the problem what we have right here is to figure it out, something in the building code, as well as the city council, I think Anthony mentioned that part, that figured out the maximum number of variants, because the commissioner basically granted because they have the power to do that. And the building code is silence in that direction. The only thing is the impose had to demolish. And that is the biggest problem that we have right here. In my opinion, yes, DOB can do better. Yes. And I myself, I have applied for some variants, and sometimes they deny because they are saying too many projects, contrary what you are saying. And they deny that part. So my point is, probably our community, we have to establish a link between the community board and put properly complaints so we can have a report from the Department of Buildings, and then the Department of Buildings will be more careful to issue the variance. Because in any event, if you don't give the variance, the longer will be the job, and the more torture will be for the residents. So we have to figure out something that allow to do the development, but at the same time be more careful with the residents. And for the residents, I feel very bad for them. But the problem is there is no other way to build in New York City. It's nothing that tell me, oh, you use this technology and then you can reduce noise. No, there is no such a thing. And that is the point of the development. From the point of the residents, obviously, I want to live peaceful in my house. I don't want to have noise constantly. And now wait until when it's coming the excavation of the existing foundation. It will be a nightmare. So figure out something to reduce the negative impact. We're not going to find a solution, but at least to palliate in some way the mitigation of noise and vibration. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. Let's see. Alita has her hand up again, which is fine. Alita, and then we can go back to Yasmina, and I think they are the only two. Go ahead, Alita.
Thank you. Thank you, Ophelia. You've been on the hot seat for quite some time, but we all, I think, appreciate your being here. So thank you for that. I have a few questions based on what I'm hearing from everyone else who's been asking questions. It seems that there is a presumption that after-hours variances are fine unless there are complaints from the neighborhood. How many complaints are required before you do a deep dive? Because the variance is granted automatically, and then you say you do a deep dive. So is it one complaint? Does an elected official carry more weight? Does the community board carry more weight? Is it 10 complaints, 100 complaints over the course of a week, over the course of a day? I mean, how is this calculated in terms of when you do a deep dive, and what does that include? I'm still baffled by the Department of Environmental Protection assessing the financial hardship of an applicant, because it doesn't seem to me they have that expertise. So who exactly, what I'd like to know what kinds of calculations go into, well, in this case, I'm looking at the financial hardship. So what kinds of calculations go into that kind of analysis of whether an after-hours variance is deserved? And is the desire for more immediate profits part of that calculation? Because we've seen it in numerous instances. The other question I have is how many variances are rejected from the applicants, and how many are pulled when there is a problem with the behavior of the developer or the contractor or the noise. And my last point is that you were talking about the hospital on Lexington Avenue deserving the same kind of treatment as that on York, except that the circumstances are completely different. I'm not getting the sense at all that circumstances are considered by DOB in assessing whether there should be an after-hours variance. But when you have a building that is going to be way more than a multiple of what the zoned height is, precisely because the avenue is narrow and it is sitting in the middle of a residential district, perhaps the considerations do need to be different about the calculations for whether they should be getting an after-hours variance, because there are an awful lot of people, and particularly people within the hospital, that they insist remain open. But there will be a lot of people in the residential community that are affected by this, because the hospitals on York Avenue, they have the East River on one side, they have other hospitals around them. They're not sitting with a narrow street bordering them and residential buildings on every side from multiple blocks in every single direction. So I guess those are my points. I don't expect really a response, but just maybe a consideration of the comments on the hospital. But I would like a response on how many after-hours variances are rejected, how many after-hours variances are pulled, and how many complaints are needed. What kind of complaints are indicated in order to get that kind of analysis, and how deep does that analysis really go? Thank you, and thanks for calling on me again, Anthony. That's it.
Thank you, Alita. And so we are interested in those numbers of after-hours variances not granted and after-hours variances pulled, for lack of, you used a better word, Ophelia, and also in a way, the number of after-hours variances that result in violations. Okay. DJ, and then don't worry, Yasmina, I won't forget you. DJ.
Hi, I will be brief. I know we've been talking for a while. We've heard a lot of comments. And I've learned a lot tonight, so I want to say thank you to the presenters. One thing I always want to mention, and you'll hear this as a recurring theme from me, but when we keep talking about after-hours variances or really anything else is just being solely for developer profits when it's in the hardship case, it doesn't miss the other side of the ledger, which is the future residents of those buildings. They are not here to advocate for themselves, so I will do so because our conversations almost never acknowledge these people. And if the buildings go up faster, then the people get to live there sooner. So just keep that in mind if we are going to deny or slow every variance. One thing I'm hearing, and some others have mentioned this, there is a profusion of variances, and if there are so many exceptions that the baseline administrative code starts to feel meaningless, then maybe it is a sign that the code itself needs revision. It might not be DOB or DEP's case-by-case decisions, but the rules that they're asked to enforce. So I guess I'd ask, my fellow board members, what do we want to see in a bill, perhaps sponsored by Councilmember Menon's office? I know there's a representative on. Include, different decibel thresholds, or maybe a requirement that DOB considers the cumulative noise impact when there are multiple projects in the same area, like Valerie mentioned. I think I'll stop.
Thank you. Yasmina.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to do a deep dive when there is an issue at a site. And I wanted to circle back to 1233 York Avenue because that's the site that I'm most familiar with. And you started to discuss that you had done a deep dive with that and that this is a unique situation. But I wanted to get clarification. Unique situation just means unique situation. It doesn't allow the laws to be put aside. Is that correct? Or are there exceptions to the law? Should I just go on and then you'll answer later?
Yeah.
Okay, and then, because as far as like a deep dive on 1233 York Avenue and the example of certain decibels being allowed on Saturdays that are not allowed during the week, that's just factually incorrect. And, I have a spreadsheet that was given to me by that site's own monitors, and it demonstrates the decibel levels throughout the week, throughout the daytime, and throughout the evening. I have no one to send this information to act upon it. And so when you're talking about deep dive, I hope that there's a way to bring in the community into that so that we can have a way to present evidence beyond a 311 call that results in a DEP inspector arriving after the fact. Is there any plan to modernize the DOB AHV after hours variance approval process? Because it just seems like so much of this could be verified by pulling the decibel readings from construction sites who they're required to monitor this information. Why does it take a DEP inspector to show up a week later rather than pulling the construction site's own monitoring system? It's right there. And so that brings me to the DOB mission, which I, as a New York City just resident, understands that the DOB's mission is to protect us. It's to protect not just from falling debris, but it's supposed to protect our quality of life. It's supposed to protect our health. And so if there are these excessive after hours variances being issued, you're not upholding your obligation, as I understand it, to uphold the protective laws and regulations that we rely on. I get really worried when I hear about people saying, because the laws and regulations are being broken so often, we should adjust the laws and regulations. Please no, like that's not the conversation we're trying to open. We're trying to open a conversation where people can have healthier lives here. Also, the whole idea of, we have to get these jobs done quickly so that people aren't subjected to them for this amount of time. There is always another project now with City of Yes. There's going to be a project in every borough, in every neighborhood. There need to be times where we can rely on rest, not with the investment in the future for future generations to supposedly enjoy what we've sacrificed. Meanwhile, they're probably going to be subjected to more demolition and construction as well. Lot said, but at the end of it, I'm just wondering if there are plans to improve the system to fulfill your mission to protect our health and our well-being. Thank you.
Thank you, Yasmina.
Yeah,
You might comment, Ophelia.
Sure. Thank you so much, Anthony. So I'll go to Alita's comments or questions that she asked. How many variants are rejected? We will need to pull the data for
Please
Community
do.
Board 8. We do reject variances, believe it or not. We deny variances all the time. So I'll say that. And how many variants are being pulled? I think she asked that question. So that's something we would need to get specific numbers from analytics for CB8. So she mentioned also the financial hardship for DP. I can't speak on behalf of DP, but undue hardship does not only comprise of financial hardship. There are different numerous factors that need to be considered with that, but that's a DP question that should be directed to DP, but I just want to say it's not only financial hardship. There are other factors that they do take into consideration. So I know she also mentioned that the types of complaints when reviewing for the issuance of variances. We take every complaint serious. If we receive a complaint by 311 for a variance that's taken seriously, we look into it. If it's a complaint by the board or the elected, we look into it. If you come in on a Tuesday night to file a complaint with us in person, we look into it. So it doesn't matter if it's one complaint, two complaints, we look into it. The only time as it pertains to a variance is if no complaints are filed. I hope I answered that correctly for you, Alita. But any complaint at all, we do take a deep dive and we look into it prior to issuing the variance.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ophelia. Truly, it was wonderful that you were able and willing, frankly, to take the time to be here today, and we hope that we will have you back again on other occasions with a whole different set of questions. But thank you so much. Thank you to both of you, to you, Ophelia, and to Jamila. And I'm going to turn this over to Elizabeth.
Yes, and I will not keep you from your dinner much longer. But I wanted to tell you what's coming up in our October meeting, just to let you know what we'll be taking up. Of course, other things might happen and come up as well. But what we're planning to do, we'll be discussing finding unflawed solutions to creating and preserving housing, particularly affordable housing. And that I hope you will think about that and join us next month in October. And is there any old business? New business? A motion?
No, Alita and actually
Oh,
Marco both
Alita.
have their hands up.
Okay, Alita?
Thank you, Elizabeth. For new business, if the mayor's proposals for the revision of the city charter pass, there is, I think one of them states that they'll be going through the different neighborhoods, and the bottom 5 with less affordable housing than other neighborhoods will have a much easier way, or they will impose affordable housing projects, which will probably be part of much taller towers on those neighborhoods. Given how many affordable housing units we've lost, I think that the committee should examine how to make the point to the city that we have tried to get affordable housing, that we have tried to engage with city planning on special districts to preserve affordable housing, that it is the as of right towers that are causing the loss of affordable housing and not a NIMBY approach to affordable housing, because otherwise they will sock us probably in the bottom 5 districts of the city, and who knows what kind of affordable housing they'll impose. And we know that the way ballot proposals are written, they're written so that a yes vote just looks like the most logical, most sensical kind of response. So I just think we need to be proactive here and do something to notify the city that we have tried and tried and tried to come up with ways to preserve and encourage and bring in affordable housing, as Elizabeth just mentioned. That's it. Thank you.
Thank
Yes,
you.
I think that is part of the story, and we have an application. We've had it for about 120 years for special zoning districts that would save affordable housing. But I think the reason we want to take up the unflawed ways, because the city wants to build affordable housing quite rightly, but it doesn't protect what it has, and the numbers are ridiculous. And why build with one hand and tear down with the other? So I think that's our focus. Thank you. And Marco? Marco?
Thank you, Elizabeth. Well, I'm gonna add something else. The priority in our community, this is gonna be the discussion, but I'm gonna raise the issue that our priority is not to build affordable housing. Our priority is to protect the affordable housing existing, and not only to protect, but to improve. I'll give an example of the improvement. The developers transferred the air rights for a couple of buildings. With all of these buildings have environmental control violations. He transferred the air rights. The building that transferred the air rights received millions of dollars and never obeyed the law. It has to be obeyed the law, and it has to transfer. Yes, I don't mind to profit, they can profit, but at the same time, they had to fix those buildings in order to improve the quality of life. That is our direction. Our direction, I was saying no more affordable housing. I mean, unless it is possible to build, but because we are the most densest populations in the country. So we have been collaborating more than any community board in the country. So it's time that the other communities bring a solution, propose a solution. We have been producing a solution. One of them is obviously the speculation of the land. And the speculation of the land is done by Department of City Planning when they establish regulations that do not fit in the character to build affordable housing. I think that's my point, and I'm gonna go in that direction. Thank you.
Okay, we will take it up next month.
Yep.
Okay, did anyone else have a paw up? No.
Move to
Okay,
adjourn.
second? The meeting is adjourned. Thank you very
Thank you.
much for coming.